today we will be celebrating the life of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and her contribution and our recommitment to the philosophy and to our service to humanity. I want to say a few words about White Lotus and why it is so symbolic to us. White Lotus is actually a symbol in many world religions. It's a very prominent symbol also in Buddhism. But the unique nature of the lotus is that the flowers of the seed itself already have the leaves of the lotus when the lotus comes into formation and becomes the flower. And that symbolizes the emanation from the ideation into the material world. This is the ideation of the universal will into the manifestation of the material. And in that way, the lotus flower also symbolic of us as a human beings, that we have that seed in us of everything already being present. And nothing in life has to be added or removed. Like a lotus seed has the little leaves of the lotus flower, we have the little leaves of our divine nature. And throughout life, we just come into the manifestation of that from the idea. And this is what H.P. Blavatsky dedicated her life to recording, passing on to us, and leaving us with the philosophy that helps us to achieve this path, to follow this path and achieve this goal. And I want to speak a little bit about her and what she asked at the end of her life. I think this is, for me, it was very important moment to learn of her last words when she died, and why we have today this commemoration of the teaching and our commitment to the service and to the teaching. H.P. Blavatsky, I will cover on the beginning of her life, and during the talk we will speak of her most important formative years of the teaching. She was born in 1831 in Russia, current Ukraine, and since her childhood she was a very unusual child. She had definitely psychic powers, and the servants were terrified of her, and everyone was calling her Segmika, what means basically someone possessing unusual powers. She lost her mother at age 11, and then was raised by her father and his family, and her father was an officer in the Russian cavalry. Helena often spent time with him in the stables with the horses. She was a professional rider. She rode the way the man would ride, not the side saddle, and she would shock the society at that time of her unconventional thinking on the gender, on the freedom of an individual since her basically childhood. She was, out of her worldly talent, she was a professional pianist, concert pianist, and she showed many talents from early on in life. She made a bet. It was a bet that she will marry the man who will propose to her, because it is actually a little bit of a cultural tradition, and I can reflect on it being from the region. She was often told that no one will ever marry her because of her unconventional views on life and on the gender roles in the society, that she will never find a match. And she made a bet that she will, and she was proposed by Mr. Blavatsky, who was double her age, and he accepted. She did not intend to marry him, so she tried to pull the proposal off the table, and that was not possible. So she was married to him, and the marriage was never consummated. And this is when, on a horseback, she basically took off and ran away from the hometown where she lived. She was assisted by her father, and she went to Constantinople. And that was the beginning of her journeys. At age 20, and this is actually much earlier than I thought of this, at age 20, she was in London, Hyde Park. And this is the first time when she met the master, and she received the plan for her life and for her mission. And from there, she traveled extensively to collect knowledge, to understand the world religions, to understand the people, to understand the the world. And when she came back, and this will be covered during the talk, so I don't want to go there. When she came back, she basically synthesized all of this with the master's help into the teaching that we are celebrating today. What I want to say about the White Lotus Day and this day of recommitment and commemoration, that she died fairly young from the kidney failure. I believe she was 61, and she was surrounded by her friends. 16, she was 16, by her friends, who recorded her last words. And her last words were, "Keep the link unbroken." So my last incarnation in this life would not be, in this earth, would not be in vain. She did inform us this is your last incarnation, and she asked to keep the link unbroken. And this is what we do by recommitting to our service and to the teaching, is keeping that link unbroken. And now I would like to invite the speaker for today's talk. First reading. Yeah. And I would like to invite the first reading.
This reading number 1 is from the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna, what, O Keshava, is the description of that wise and devoted man who is fixed in contemplation and confirmed in spiritual knowledge? What may such a sage declare? Where may he dwell? Does he move and act like other men? And Krishna responds, a man is said to be confirmed in spiritual knowledge when he forsaketh every desire which entereth into his heart, and of himself is happy and content in the self, through the self. His mind is undisturbed in adversity. He is happy and contented in prosperity, and he is a stranger to anxiety, fear, and anger. Such a man is called a Muni. When in every condition he receives each event, whether favorable or unfavorable, with an equal mind which neither likes nor dislikes, his wisdom is established, and having met good or evil, neither rejoiceth at the one nor is cast down by the other. He is confirmed in spiritual knowledge, when like the tortoise, he can draw in all his senses and restrain them from their wonted purposes. The hungry man loseth sight of every other object but the gratification of his appetite. And when he is become acquainted with the Supreme, he loseth all taste for objects of whatever kind. The tumultuous senses and organs harry away by force the heart even of the wise man who striveth after perfection. Let a man restraining all these remain in devotion at rest in me, his true self. For he who had his senses and organs in control possesses spiritual knowledge. He who attended to the inclinations of the senses in them had a concern. From this concern is created passion. From passion, anger. From anger is produced delusion. From delusion, a loss of the memory. From the loss of memory, loss of discrimination. And from loss of discrimination, loss of all. But he who, free from attachment or repulsion for objects, experienceth them through the senses and organs, with his heart obedient to his will, attains to tranquility of thought. And this tranquil state attained therefrom shall soon result a separation from all troubles. And his mind being thus at ease, fixed upon one object, it embraceth wisdom from all sides. The man whose heart and mind are not at rest is without wisdom or the power of contemplation. Who doth not practice reflection hath no calm, and how can a man without calm obtain happiness? The uncontrolled heart, following the dictates of the moving passions, snatcheth away his spiritual knowledge, as the storm the bark upon the raging ocean. Therefore, O great armed one, he is possessed of spiritual knowledge whose senses are withheld from objects of sense. What is night to those who are unenlightened is as day to his gaze. What seems as day is known to him as night, the night of ignorance. Such is the self-governed sage.
Dennis, are you reading number 2?
I have number 2. Reading number 2 from the Voice of the Silence. Arhans and sages of the boundless vision are rare as the blossom of the Udumbra tree. Arhans are born at midnight hour, together with the sacred plants of 9 and 7 stalks, the holy flower that opens and blooms in darkness out of the pure dew and on the frozen bed of snow-capped heights, heights that are trodden by no sinful foot. No Arhan, O Lanu, becomes one in that birth when, for the first, the soul begins to long for final liberation. Yet, O thou anxious one, no warrior volunteering fight in the fierce strife between the living and the dead. Not one recruit can ever be refused the right to enter on the path that leads toward the field of battle. For either he shall win or he shall fall. Yea, if he conquers, nirvana shall be his. Before he casts his shadow off his mortal coil, that pregnant cause of anguish and illimitable pain, in him will men a great and holy Buddha honor. And if he fails, e'en then he does not fail in vain. The enemies he slew in the last battle will not return to life in the next birth that will be his. But if thou wouldest nirvana reach or cast the prize away, let not the fruit of action and inaction be thy motive, thou of dauntless heart. Know that the bodhisattva, who liberation changes for renunciation to don the miseries of secret life, is called thrice honored. O thou candidate for woe throughout the cycles. The path is one, disciple yet in the end twofold. Marked are the stages by 4 and 7 portals. At one end, bliss immediate, and the other, bliss deferred. Both are of merit and the reward. The choice is thine. The one becomes the two, the open and the secret. The first one leadeth to the goal, the second to self-immolation. When the permanent is sacrificed, the mutable, the prize is thine. The drop returneth whence it came. The open path leads to the changeless change. Nirvana, the glorious state of absoluteness, the bliss past human thought. Thus, the first path is liberation, but the second is renunciation, and therefore called the path of woe. That secret path leads the Arhan to mental woe unspeakable, woe for the living dead, and helpless pity for the men of karmic sorrow. The fruit of Kama sages dare not still. For it is written, teach to eschew all causes, the ripple of effect, as the great tidal wave thou shalt let run its course. The open way no sooner has thou reached its goal, will lead thee to reject the bodhisattvic body and make thee enter the thrice glorious state of Dharmakaya, which is oblivion of the world and men forever. The secret way leads to paranirvanic bliss, but at the close of kalpas without number, nirvana is gained and lost from boundless pity and compassion for the world of the deluded mortals. But it is said, the last shall be the greatest. Samyak Sambuddha, the teacher of perfection, gave up his self for the salvation of the world by stopping at the threshold of nirvana, the pure state. Thou hast cast the knowledge, now conquering the two ways. Thy time will come for choice, O thou of eager soul, when thou hast reached the end and passed the 7 portals. Thy mind is clear. No more art thou entangled in delusive thoughts, for thou hast learned all. Unveiled stand truth and looks thee sternly in the face. She says, sweet are the fruits of the rest and liberation for the sake of self, but sweeter still the fruits of long and bitter duty, aye, renunciation for the sake of others, of suffering fellow men. He who becomes Pratyekya Buddha makes his obeisance but to the self. The bodhisattva who has won the battle, who holds the prize within his palm, yet says in his divine compassion, for others' sake This great reward I yield accomplishes the greater renunciation. A Savior of the world is he. Behold, the goal of bliss and the long path of woe are the furthest end. Thou canst choose either, O aspirant to sorrow throughout the coming cycles.
Angela, you can start.
This is from the Light of Asia. Pray not, the darkness will not brighten. Ask not from the silence, for it cannot speak. Vex not your mournful minds with pious pains. Our brothers, sisters, I seek not from the helpless gods by gift and hymn, no bribe with blood, no feed with fruit and cakes. Within yourselves deliverance must be sought. Each man his prison makes. Each has such lordship as the loftiest ones. Nay, for with powers above, around, below, as with the flesh and whatsoever lives, acts, makes joy and war. What has been brings what shall be and is, worse, better, last for first and first for last. The angels in the heavens of gladness reap fruit of a holy past. The devils in the underworlds wear out deeds that we wicked in an age gone by. Nothing endures fair virtues waste with time. Foul sins grow purged thereby. Who toiled a slave may come anew a prince, for gentle worthiness and merit won. Who ruled a king may wander earth in rags, for things done and undone. Higher than Indra's you may lift your lot, and sink it lower than the worm or gnat. The end of many myriad lives is this, the end of myriads that. Only while turns this wheel invisible, no pause, no peace, no staying place can be. Who mounts will fall, who falls may mount. The spokes go round unceasingly over. If you lay bound upon the wheel of change, and no way of breaking from the chain, the heart of boundless being is a curse, the soul of things fell pain. You are not bound, the soul of things is sweet, the heart of being is celestial rest. Stronger than woe is will, that which was good does pass to better best. I, Buddha, who wept with all my brothers' tears, whose heart was broken by a whole world's war, laugh and am glad, for there is liberty. Ho, you who suffer, no, you suffer from yourselves. None else compels, none other holds you that you live and die, and whirl upon the wheel and hug and kiss its spokes of agony. Its tire of tears, its nape of nothingness. Behold, I show you truth. Lower than hell, higher than heaven, outside the utmost stars, further than Brahman does dwell. Before beginning and without an end, as space eternal and as surety sure, is fixed a power divine, which moves to good, only its laws endure. And
Thank you, readers and introducer. HPV's background, her travels all over the world, magnetizing the world, and her adventures and also her challenges. She had all kinds of experiences, as the first speaker indicated. All this helped prepare her for her even greater challenges in her 20 years of public service consecrated to Theosophy. Her master ordered her to go to America, and she left the next day. She had a first-class passage, but downgraded it to steerage class in order to get passage for a woman and her children who had been sold bogus tickets. On July 7, 1873, she arrived in New York penniless. She earned money by making flowers. HPB's mission and life became dedicated to the philosophy she brought from the Master Lodge as their messenger and teacher to the world. She knew that the Anglo-Saxon races would eventually be highly influential. So she had to write her books in English for that need. Within 5 years of coming to the U.S., she had written Isis Unveiled. HPB came as a moral pioneer to change the body and mind of the race for future centuries. To understand her message, we must apply the principles that she left in her writings. Over and over again, she reiterated the principles of nature around us and corresponded them to the principles of human nature. The sectarianism of the time was camouflaged under religion and dogma, and there was the materialism of the age, enrobed in science. Her objective was to make inroads in both religion and science. The sectarians looked at her as their enemy, and the scientists probably thought she was a fanatic. HPB put forth that God is not a separate being, but is in all, that there is one law which manifests in myriads of ways, like that small voice of conscience that wells up inside of us that Mother always said we should always listen to. Before both pain and pleasure both come from this one law, which is divine, impartial, and impersonal. The basis of what became the first of three objects of the Theosophical movement was to form the nucleus of a universal brotherhood under one supreme soul. Even to this day, do we see the poor and the rich, the white and the black as brothers from the same source? And there's modern science and religion that only recently became sensitive to the common practice of considering women inferior to men. It has taken about 150 years since HPB's landing in New York for us to take such disparities seriously. Then there is the second object, to demonstrate the importance of studying ancient and modern religion, philosophies, and sciences. And the third object, to study and investigate the unexplained laws of nature and unknown powers latent in man. HPB taught over and over again the idea of comparing and contrasting to get nearer to the truth. She showed us that we are microcosms of the macrocosm of the world around us. How many of us even try to see us as microcosms of all around us? Today, there are hundreds of people who look at HPB with devotion, gratitude, and love, because they understand that what she wrote was through her own light that she brought from the source. Mr. Judge wrote that we don't need Alcott, Sinet, the Sonnet, nor his word, nor any external sources to get to know HPB. In order to get to know her principles, Mr. Judge tells us to study Isis Unveiled. He adds that to know the principles of Jesus of Nazareth, we don't need to go to the priest of the church, but just read the 5th chapter of Matthew. That will tell us all we need to know about the Christ principle. So if we know her ideals, and look at the 3 objects, do we see a great teacher through a great teaching, a great leader of mankind, proved by the noblest of ideals that she brought out and embodied? Do we see a woman? Do we see in a woman form a great warrior like Krishna Avatar, who came many centuries ago? HPB wrote ceaselessly, never will we find a word of conceit, malice, ill will, pride, hatred, ambition, lust, nor a quest for position in her writings. Compare what HPB left us with the religions of today, where people may seek personal favors from a supreme being of that nature of work on a personal basis, which humanity entices or seduces or ravages nature through materialism. Some such ideas are not necessarily bad, but all are earthly. They're personal, they're mutable, they're sordid. HPV's principles were ancient, constant, and based on unchanging ideals and external spirit. HPV bestowed her labor unselfishly to all, for all to take what they can. For many years, she gave out the truth as best it could be given out, no matter what. She carried on when she was accused of being immoral. But HPB was not capable of such charges as she was an androgen. She shared her statements of principle and constantly reiterated her ideals despite personal ridicule and that terrible insult to the soul, betrayal and ingratitude at the hands of those she strove only to aid. She was crucified in her effort to help mankind for 17 years as she had to deal with the mercenaries of the East and the West. She neither sought sympathy nor pitied herself. We will find in Theosophy a morality, spiritual, intellectual, psychic, and universal that transcends any ideal of mankind. She embodied the truth she brought from the source. Find men who considered themselves bodies, for men who consider themselves bodies, she showed that they were really souls. To men of science who have learning and information, she came to give knowledge. When she wrote, what she wrote, she lived. Her mission in life was to show us the path to becoming. She started the esoteric section and constantly reiterated the objects of Theosophy. Nowhere else can be found close to anything that she brought in church, state, or school, although all of them are slowly, quietly moving toward the philosophy she brought out. In order to truly understand HPV and her mission, we must understand and apply to ourselves her writings. To see what kind of changes that have been brought about in our universe today. This is no small task. We can learn who and what we are and who HPV was only through her occultism. But we cannot do this except through our own occultism. By exploring the unsounded depths of our nature, only then can we understand the occultism of HPV. So was our mission a failure, as some said? Was our occultism defeated? Not in the least. However short the understanding of the true students of Theosophy, however aberrant their perception of her vast nature, they know the light that shines comes from her, reading those books left to us. She put the sectarian world, religion, and science into ferment. They were looking for new knowledge, but if the old were worth keeping, why come up with something new? Nevertheless, the ferment are going on because HPV interjected these age-old ideas into the minds of humanity. The principles HPV introduced never change. Humanity will eventually get it, and as it comes to realize that ideas must be based on solidness of ancient ideals. She was very successful in getting the ball rolling. In the end, humanity is going to smash priestcraft, defeat statecraft, use capitalism for the benefit of all, and change the idea of property rights and ownership. So out of this larva stage of fermentation, from this rotting chrysalis will emerge an achievement of a new civilization, a true religion for all, a new conception of the purpose of life. Evolution as immortal spiritual entities. All this will relate back to the occultism of HPV. They've had HPV, but not many profited. Where her mission was a failure, it was because people failed to study her principles, adopt her ideals, emulate her conduct, and follow the path that she showed. But today, there are those all over the world studying the principles and studying to assimilate into their own lives the ideals that she held dear. They are doing their utmost to follow the path she showed the masses who are behind. Could anyone evoke the magic words today whereby men would trudge with bleeding naked feet over ice to, as they did at Valley Forge, and they were fighting too? Okay, is that kind of inspiration gone that gave us the flag, for this flag, of this freedom? HPV is coming at this cyclic interval, starting a fire burning that nothing can quench, even 10,000 years from now. That presence will still be ever clear, ever present, ever dear to those who brush in any way the occultism of HPV. The appreciation of occultism is in the hundreds of those to whom HPV is more than a mere presence in physical body. To carry on the work, to water the seed she sowed, they will water if need be, through their blood, their tears, and as they assimilate HPV's occultism. In 1875, HPV met Mr. Judge for the first time in this life. Her subsequent letters to him ended. Doors to death and after HPV. And Mr. Judge wrote, "It was her eye that attracted me, the eye the one whom I must have known in lives long past away. She looked at me in recognition at that first hour and never since has that look changed. November 17, 1875. The Theosophical Society was founded. HPB held open house every evening at 1876 and 1875. Many prominent persons of her day called on her. Lively discussions would ensue, lasting sometimes until early morning. Mr. Judge collaborated closely with HPB as she wrote her first book, Volume 1 on Science and Volume 2 on Theology. Mr. Judge recorded, Isis unveiled, exhibited immense research. The strange part is, as I and many others can attest, as eyewitnesses, that the writer had no library researchers and possessed no notes of investigation or readings previously done. All was written straight out of hand, and yet Isis is full of references to books in the British Museum and other great libraries, and every reference is correct. Either then, we have a woman who is capable of storing in her memory massive fact, dates, numbers, titles, and subjects, such as no other human being ever was capable of, or her claim to help from unseen beings is just. HPB wrote, Isis contains a mass of original and never hitherto divulged information on occult subjects. Neither ideas nor teachings are mine, she said. Every word of information found in this work and in my other writings later on comes from the teachings of our Eastern masters, and many a passage in these book works have been written under their dictation. Colonel O'Connor wrote, she could never avoid attracting the envy and animosity of those who, in their trivial inferiority, felt wounded by the splendor of the faculties and talents of this really marvelous woman. July 8, HPB was proud becoming a citizen of the United States of America. 1879 and 80 in India, HPB influenced the minds of those who led the movement to gain influence, to gain India's eventual independence. December 1884, HPB seriously ill on the chair of Countess Pochmeister, but she began writing the Secret Doctrine anyway. She fell into a coma as she labored day and night until 1888, when the Secret Doctrine was finally published. Volume 1 was on the evolution of our Earth in the universe. Volume 2 was on evolution of man on our Earth, the future role and the goals of evolution. It had taken HPB 4 years to finish her magnum opus. The Secret Doctrine is based on standards of the Book of Zion, in English Wisdom. It points out the fashion in which we are constantly rewarding or punishing ourselves. The hands that smite us are. About her own book, HPB wrote, I have here made on a nosegay of cold Eastern flowers and have brought nothing of my own but the spring that ties them. April 1886. The first issue of Mr. Judge's The Path was issued. HPB called it Pure Booty. Respect for HPB and the Theosophical Society grew under Mr. Judge's leadership in America. September 1887, the first issue of HPB's magazine, Lucifer, appeared. To bring to light the hidden thing, darkness. HPB said, Lucifer, the light bearer, is a morning star, and Lucifer is no profane or satanic title.
Oh, okay.
Well, okay, good. Okay, September 1887, Lucifer appeared, I just read that, and HPB said, quote, Lucifer, the light bearer, is a morning star, and Lucifer is no profane or a satanic title. 1888, November, December, Mr. Judge was in London to help HPB in drafting the rules and pledge for the esoteric section. Mr. Judge also visited Dublin and inspired the new generation of Irish poets and writers like W.B. Yeats and George W. Russell. July 1889, HPB published The Key to Theosophy. It's a tiny little book there. It's for students to learn what Theosophy is and to teach other inquirers. 1889, HPB wrote her last book, The Voice of the Silence. That's The Voice of the Silence. Yeah, I'm sorry. Key to Theosophy is right down here. It's dedicated to the few who desire to make Theosophy a living power in their lives. July 1889. If you can't read her writings, the copies of them, they'll be online later, or send us an email. We'll be glad to send you a copy of that. July 1889, HPB was asked to open a club for poor section, the poorest in the section of London, or say that again. July 1889, HPB was asked to open a club in a poor section of London for working women. The transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge, which is it is right there, were issued from questions and answers sessions at the Blavatsky Lodge, December 88, 1989, March 1889. So that gives us a good idea of what was going on when HPB was on this theme. From the first to the last of HPB's writings, there was an unbroken continuity of ideas, a single theme, its emanation from the absolute unknowable as an all-inclusive deific source, which evolves according to regular laws of progression, taking into account every part and aspect of being, including man, the atom, and the universe. Evolution is a continuous, universal, and involves every atom of the living universe. HPB repeatedly focuses attention on the Lodge of Living Depths, on their service of humanity as the preservers of knowledge and wisdom down the ages. Man alone is the maker of his own destiny. He has the power to choose the path of selfishness and materialism, or to join the few who are making sustained efforts to follow the path. The greatness that HPB pointed to, that path that elevates mankind from this dark age to ushering in the golden age. May 8, 1891. That would be, yeah. I forgot. That's actually today by the time we get HPV suffering for years from choice from chronic kidney disease succumbed during a food epidemic raging in London. She died at 2:25 p.m. in the presence of several of her friends. Her last words were, "Keep the lake unbroken. Let not my last incarnation be a failure." The press around the world discussed Theosophy again. It is said it is still available through ULT in its pure form. It shows us the path to perfection that we can all take, that we, our universe, and all therein are from the same source, that all evolved by natural impulse up to the human level, after which time we proceed by self-induced and self-devised methods, that each of us is a divine being, a God in the making, if we choose to work in sync with the laws of nature. Critics could never find fault with what HPV presented as Theosophy, as it is correct. So they went after her, this mighty soul, with personal accusations, all of which were false. A New York newspaper published a critical piece about HPV, which it found to be false after her death. It invited Mr. Judge to write a report, which the paper published. Mr. Judge called the report the esoteric sheet. Great names influenced by the Theosophical movement included Dr. Albert Einstein, who kept a copy of the Secret Doctrine on his desk for reference. Thomas A. Edison, Gandhi, Nehru, and the list goes on. Theosophical movement has prompted an enormous change in thinking and a more compassionate regard bent on society and the creatures of the world around us. Science has advanced tremendously. The word Theosophy is known to many, even if they are unsure what it teaches. Theosophy has brought some ancient Sanskrit terms into our everyday language, and doctrines like the law of justice and other powerful ideas are integrated into the philosophy of giving. We will finish with a statement by HPV. Every pledge or promise, unless built upon 4 pillars, absolute sincerity, unflinching determination, unselfishness of purpose, and moral power, which makes the 4th support and equiposes the other 3 pillars, is insecure building if we don't have that. The pledges of those who are sure of the strength of the 4th alone are recorded. We have listed references to 500 pages of works that by HPV here. These books, and those by Mr. Judge and others, presenting the pure teachings, can be ordered from ULT Los Angeles, purchased from this or any ULT, or copied electronically from the Phoenix, Arizona ULT website. And we're gonna now take remaining minutes today to rededicate ourselves to helping humanity and contemplating on this, doing whatever we can do to keep the link unbroken. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for the readers and the introducer for your what you did. And we'll see you next week at 11 o'clock on Google Meet, where we'll be continuing our study of the Ocean of Theosophy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Did
See you next week.
did everything come out all right on?
Yes, you did. Very clear.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.